The clinking of crystal glasses and loud laughter filled the private dining room. Harper, my daughter-in-law, sat at the center of the long table, glowing under the pendant lights. It was her 32nd birthday, and David, my son, hovered beside her like an eager assistant. I sat near the end of the table, sipping my water. I was used to this seat. It was the one farthest from the center of attention. When the cake was cleared, the gifts began. Harper tore through designer bags and expensive perfumes with practiced enthusiasm. Finally, she reached my small, silver-wrapped box. I had spent weeks finding it. It was a vintage silver locket, polished and restored, containing a tiny, hand-painted portrait of a garden. It wasn't flashy, but it was elegant, the kind of piece you keep for a lifetime. Harper peeled back the paper and opened the velvet box. Her smile vanished, replaced by a deep, unimpressed frown. She pinched the locket between her manicured nails, dangling it like a dead spider. "What is this?" she asked, her voice carrying over the music. "It's a vintage locket," I replied evenly. "I thought you might appreciate something unique." Harper dropped it back into the box. She scoffed, looking at her friends. "I don't wear used things, Charlotte. It looks like you dug it out of a thrift store." David shifted uncomfortably, but didn't speak. He never did. "It's just a thought, Harper," I offered, my voice steady. She picked up the locket again, her eyes narrowing. "It's cheap, worthless trash." Then with a flick of her wrist, she threw it. The metal struck my cheek, a sharp sting that made the table go completely silent. The locket bounced off my shoulder and clattered onto the hardwood floor. Nobody moved. David stared at his plate. Harper crossed her arms, waiting for me to cry or apologize. I didn't do either. I calmly bent down, picked up the locket, and dropped it into my purse. I stood up, pushed my chair in, and turned toward the exit. The real surprise for Harper wouldn't happen in this restaurant. It would happen in the parking lot. The night air was crisp, carrying the faint smell of roasted garlic from the restaurant's exhaust vents. My cheek throbbed slightly where the silver locket had hit me, but my hands weren't shaking. For years, I had made excuses for David's silence and Harper's entitlement. Tonight, the excuses ran out. I walked across the brightly lit parking lot, my heels clicking softly against the asphalt. I bypassed my sensible sedan and walked straight toward the sleek black BMW parked near the entrance. 3 years ago, David had begged me to co-sign the loan for it. Harper needed a safe, reliable car for her new job, he claimed, but David's credit was terrible. Ultimately, I didn't just co-sign. I bought the car outright in my name, letting them drive it while they supposedly paid me back. Those payments had stopped after 2 months. I reached into the side pocket of my purse and pulled out a heavy metal fob. I always kept the spare key. Pressing the unlock button, the BMW's headlights flashed, illuminating the dark pavement. I climbed into the driver's seat. It smelled heavily of Harper's expensive perfume and stale coffee. I adjusted the mirrors, shifted into drive, and pulled out of the parking lot, leaving my own car behind for now. I could take an Uber back for it tomorrow. As I merged onto the highway, the dashboard clock read 10:15 p.m. They would probably be finishing their drinks right about now. Harper would be bragging about her other gifts, and David would be relieved I was gone so he wouldn't have to mediate. They wouldn't notice the car was missing until the valet asked for their ticket. When my phone buzzed in the cup holder 30 minutes later, the screen flashing David's name, I didn't answer. I just reached over and turned the volume down. I was already pulling into my garage, but my evening's work was far from over. My house was quiet when I walked inside. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked steadily, a familiar and grounding rhythm. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't pour a glass of wine. Instead, I walked straight to my home office and woke up my computer. The glowing screen reflected in the dark room. I opened my browser and logged into my bank account. For the last 4 years, my finances had been tied to David and Harper, in a dozen small, invisible ways. It started as temporary help covering a phone bill here, a car insurance premium there. Eventually, it became a permanent safety net. They lived like they were wealthy entirely because they were spending my retirement savings. I clicked on the first tab. Auto Pay Cellular Family Plan. David and Harper's numbers were listed right below mine. I selected both and hit the remove button. The screen loaded for a second before confirming the change. Next was the car insurance. The BMW was already sitting securely in my garage, so I didn't cancel the policy, but I did update the authorized drivers, removing Harper's name entirely. Then came the credit card. It was an emergency card I had given David when he started a new job meant for gas or medical expenses. Last month, the statement showed charges from a high-end salon and a boutique downtown. I navigated to the card controls and clicked Report Lost, Stolen, Cancel Card. The system processed the request instantly. I leaned back in my desk chair, taking a slow, deep breath. There was no anger left in my chest, only a hollow sort of clarity. I wasn't punishing them. I was simply untethering myself. My phone vibrated on the desk. 5 missed calls from David. 2 texts from Harper. Where is the car? Did you take it? I placed the phone face down. The real storm wouldn't hit until the morning when Harper tried to use her card for her daily $7 latte. The sunlight streamed through my kitchen window, warming the ceramic mug in my hands. It was 8:30 a.m. I had slept better than I had in months. My phone began to ring. It wasn't David this time, it was Harper. I let it ring. 2 minutes later, David called. I swiped the screen and brought the phone to my ear. Mom, finally. David's voice was frantic, breathless. Did you take the BMW last night? We had to take a $60 Uber home. And this morning, my card declined at the gas station. My phone says it has no service. I'm calling you from my work line. What is going on? I took a sip of my coffee. Good morning, David. Mom, stop. Did someone hack your accounts? Harper is freaking out. She needs the car for a brunch appointment. No one hacked my accounts, I replied calmly. I canceled the card. I removed you from the phone plan. And I took my car home. The line went dead quiet for a long moment. Then David stammered, You… what? Why? Because Harper threw a piece of metal at my face last night in front of 20 people, and you sat there and watched? I stated, keeping my tone perfectly flat. I realized I've been funding a life that doesn't respect me. She was just drunk, Mom. You embarrassed her with that cheap junk. You're overreacting. Just turn the card back on and we'll come get the car later. The car is staying in my garage. You and Harper are on your own now. I heard muffled shouting in the background. Harper was clearly standing right next to him. You can't do this. David raised his voice, adopting the aggressive tone he usually reserved for customer service reps. We need that car, then buy one, I answered. I didn't wait for his response. I ended the call. David thought I was throwing a temporary tantrum. He had no idea I was already packing their safety net into boxes. At noon, a silver sedan pulled into my driveway. An Uber sticker sat in the front window. The back doors flew open before the car even shifted into park. Harper stormed out. Her face flushed with anger, followed closely by a very stressed-looking David. I was on the front porch, repotting some ferns. I didn't stop what I was doing. I simply wiped my dirt-covered hands on my gardening apron and watched them march up the walkway. Where are the keys? Harper demanded, stopping at the bottom of the porch steps. She didn't bother with a greeting. She pointed a finger at me. You have no right to leave us stranded like that. It's my car, Harper, I said, picking up a small trowel. I have every right to park it in my own garage. David stepped up, trying to physically block Harper from moving closer. Mom, come on. This isn't funny anymore. Harper missed her brunch. I had to use my own debit card for groceries today. That's generally how adulthood works. David. I noted patting the fresh soil around a fern. Harper pushed past him, marching up the wooden steps. She reached into her designer bag and pulled out the spare house key David had given her years ago. She marched toward the front door, clearly intending to go inside and find the car keys herself. I stepped smoothly into her path, blocking the door. Excuse me, Harper snapped. Move. You are not going inside my house, I told her. My voice dropping an octave, she let out a harsh laugh. I'm getting the keys to my car, Charlotte. She reached for the door handle, her hand holding the brass house key. She wasn't expecting my hand to close over hers first. I didn't squeeze hard, just firmly enough to stop her movement. I looked her directly in the eyes. Drop the key, Harper. Harper stared at me, her confidence faltering for a split second. She tried to yank her hand away, but I held firm, my fingers clamped over the brass key. Let go of me, she yelled, looking back at David. David, do something. Your mother is assaulting me. David wrung his hands, stepping onto the porch. Mom, please, just let her in. We just want to talk. There is nothing to talk about, I replied. I released Harper's hand, but as I did, I smoothly plucked the house key from her loose grip. I slipped it into my apron pocket. Harper gasped, rubbing her hand as if I had burned it. You're insane. I'm done, I corrected her. I'm done paying for your lifestyle while you treat me like dirt. The car belongs to me. The title is in my name. The insurance is in my name. The credit card you've been maxing out is in my name. Not anymore. We made payments on that car, David protested weakly. You made 2 payments 3 years ago, I stated, looking at my son. I've paid the other 34. If you want a car, buy one. If you want a phone, pay the bill. Harper sneered, crossing her arms. You're just a bitter, lonely old woman? You think cutting us off will make us beg. You'll be begging us to visit you when you're dying alone in this house. I'd rather be alone than used, I said simply. I stepped back, wrapping my hand around the front doorknob. Call another Uber. Get off my property. You'll regret this, Charlotte, Harper hissed. I didn't answer. I stepped inside and pulled the heavy wooden door shut behind me. As the lock clicked into place, I realized something terrifying and beautiful. I didn't need them anymore. 3 weeks passed. The silence in my home, which used to feel heavy and expectant, now felt light. I spent my mornings reading on the back patio and my afternoons working in the garden. My bank account, usually drained by random mid-month transfers to cover David's emergencies, steadily grew. There were attempts to break the peace, of course. During the first week, David texted every day. First he was angry, then he tried bargaining. Just let us use the car until we save for a down payment, he wrote. I deleted the message without replying. By the second week, Harper tried a different tactic. She had one of her friends call me pretending to be a debt collector for a medical bill, hoping to scare me into turning the credit card back on. I calmly told the woman she had the wrong number and blocked it. One Tuesday afternoon, my old friend Evelyn came over for tea. We sat in the kitchen, the sunlight reflecting off the polished countertops. I saw David at the grocery store. Evelyn mentioned, carefully stirring honey into her cup. He looked tired. He was driving a very old, very dented Honda. I smiled softly. Good. He's learning how much things actually cost. Are you okay, Charlotte? Evelyn asked, studying my face. It's a hard thing cutting off your own child. It was hard the first day, I admitted. But then I realized I wasn't helping him by paying his way. I was just funding his wife's disrespect. I feel like I can finally breathe. Evelyn nodded, taking a sip of her tea. They'll try to come back, with the holidays approaching. Harper won't let go of a free ride that easily. Evelyn was right. 2 days later, a thick, expensive envelope arrived in my mailbox. Inside was an invitation to Thanksgiving dinner at David and Harper's apartment. I knew exactly what Harper was plotting. I decided to go, not out of guilt, and certainly not to reconcile. I went because I knew Harper needed an audience to play the victim, and I was ready to close this chapter permanently. I arrived exactly at 4:00 p.m. carrying a store-bought pie. David opened the door. He looked thinner, his shoulders slumped. "Mom," he breathed, looking genuinely relieved. "You came." "Hello, David." I greeted him, stepping inside. The apartment was crowded with Harper's family. The moment I walked into the living room, the chatter stopped. Harper stood near the kitchen island, holding a glass of wine. She looked me up and down, a smug smile playing on her lips. She thought my presence meant I was surrendering. Charlotte Harper announced loudly, ensuring the whole room could hear. "We're so glad you decided to join us. David and I were just talking about forgiveness." Her mother, sitting on the sofa, chimed in. "It's so important to support family, especially when times are tough. I know David has been struggling getting to work without his car. The trap was set. Harper wanted to shame me in front of her family, pressuring me to hand over the BMW keys as a grand holiday gesture of apology." I walked calmly to the kitchen island and set the pie down. "I agree," I told Harper's mother, keeping my voice pleasant. "Independence is a difficult transition, but David is 34. It was time." Harper's smile tightened. "Well, we assume you brought the car today. You know, since it's Thanksgiving. It would be a nice way to apologize for your little outburst last month." I reached into my purse. Harper's eyes lit up, expecting the heavy metal fob. Instead, I pulled out a standard white business envelope. I slid it across the marble counter toward David. Harper's smirk vanished when I handed him the envelope instead of a check or a set of keys. David stared at the white envelope resting on the counter. Harper leaned in close, her eyes darting between the paper and my face. "What is this?" David asked, his voice hesitant. "Go ahead and open it," I encouraged. He slid his finger under the flap and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a formal document printed on heavy stock. David scanned the text, his brow furrowing. "A bill of sale," he muttered. Harper snatched the paper from his hands. Her eyes scanned the lines rapidly. The color drained from her face, leaving her pale and furious. "You sold it!" Harper shrieked, her carefully crafted hostess persona shattering instantly. Her family members on the couch sat up, exchanging confused looks. "You sold our car? I sold my car." "Harper," I corrected her, my tone completely unbothered. "To a dealership on 4th Street. I didn't need a second vehicle sitting in my garage collecting dust." "That was a $40,000 car," she yelled, slamming the paper onto the counter. "You had no right." "I had the title," I replied simply. "That gave me every right." David looked at me, then looked at his wife, who was currently red-faced and screaming about lawsuits and lawyers. For the first time, he didn't try to soothe her. He just looked exhausted. "What did you do with the money?" David asked quietly. "I paid off the remaining balance of the loan," I answered, "and I used the rest to book a 3-week cruise through the Mediterranean for myself. I leave next Tuesday." Harper let out a sound of pure frustration, grabbing her wine glass as if she wanted to throw it. But she caught my eye and remembered what happened the last time she threw something at me. She slammed the glass down instead. I picked up my purse. I had delivered my message. David finally looked at his wife, seeing her clearly for the very first time. I didn't stay for turkey. I walked out of their apartment, the sound of Harper's shrieking fading behind the heavy hallway door. I drove my sensible sedan back to my quiet, peaceful house. Months passed. I took my Mediterranean cruise. I drank espresso in Rome and watched the sunset over the water in Greece. I didn't buy any souvenirs for David or Harper. I only bought things for myself. When I returned home, life settled into a beautiful, uninterrupted rhythm. I heard through Evelyn that David and Harper had moved out of their expensive downtown apartment. Without my credit card to float her shopping habits and my bank account to cover their shortfalls, reality had hit them hard. They were renting a small place in the suburbs. David called me on a Tuesday in early spring. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for favors. "Hi, Mom," he said, his voice quiet. "Hello, David." "I'm sorry," he said. It was the first time he had apologized without following it up with an excuse. For everything. For letting her treat you like that. For using you. "I appreciate that, David," I replied honestly. Can I come over sometime? Just me. To help with the yard or something." I looked out my kitchen window. The ferns I had planted months ago were thriving, green, and strong. I didn't need help with the yard. I had already hired a local kid to mow the lawn, and I handled the planting myself. "Maybe next month, David." With David, I told him, setting a boundary he actually respected. "We'll see." We hung up, and I didn't feel a heavy weight in my chest. There was no grand reunion, no tearful hugs. Just distance respect, and the quiet comfort of a life that finally belonged entirely to me. Sometimes the hardest lesson we have to learn as parents is that our help isn't always helping. When we constantly shield our adult children from the consequences of their actions, we aren't just draining our own bank accounts, we're robbing them of the chance to grow up. Setting boundaries doesn't mean you love your family less. It just means you finally respect yourself enough to stop buying their affection. We can't control how others treat us, but we absolutely control what we tolerate. True peace starts when you stop setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. If Charlotte's story resonated with you today, or if you've ever had to draw a tough line with toxic family members to protect your own peace, let me know down in the comments. I'd love to read about your experiences. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.